So, what do you want to talk about?
Oh, you know what we want to talk about, Pat. You know what we want to talk about. We got a big one, a rivalry renewed per se, traveling up there to Pittsburgh. It always blows my mind that we don't go to Pittsburgh. Or they don't come here for 8 years. It's kind of crazy.
Right. Yeah, that is, especially when you consider the legacy between the two teams. I mean, these are two of the most storied franchises in the entire NFL, and when you look at the history of them, I mean, this goes back to the '60s and especially the '70s. The Terry Bradshaw Steelers versus the Roger Staubach and Danny White Cowboys, and then bring that forward to the '90s, and then even as recently as 2016 with Zeke with the walk-off
There you
touchdown.
go.
I mean, every time the Steelers and the Cowboys play, not only is it a nail biter, but there seems to be something big on the line. Obviously, not as much this time as it was in the '90s and the '70s and things like that when Super Bowls were on the line, but still, it's always a fantastic must-watch TV situation.
Even the last two matchups, totally different matchups, right? Like you said, 2016, you had the rookie dynamos of Zeke and Dak in Pittsburgh getting the walk-off victory. What a crazy game. I went back and watched the highlights of that. I forgot just how up and down that game was emotional-wise.
Yeah.
And then the Garrett Gilbert game, right? The COVID year in 2020. OGG, we thought Garrett Gilbert had something. And didn't work out,
Yeah.
but it was an interesting contest, man. That was a fun game, though.
Yeah, man, I remember Garrett Gilly, man. Garrett Gilly, the original Gilly suit in Dallas, man. So, yeah, and here we are. It's crazy, like you said, that it only happens once damn near, every decade. But you would think the league would try to get these two teams
Right.
lined up against each other more. But that's not how the algorithm goes as far as scheduling is concerned. So all we can do is try to enjoy it when we get it, and we're about to get it this Sunday in prime time, no less.
Prime time. It's been a minute, I think, since the Cowboys played them in prime time. But Pat, let's kind of turn the page to those who may or may not be out there, because what a weird week for Cowboys injuries, right? We dealt with the Cooks thing. We've been talking about it all week. His infection in his knee. Hope everything goes well with that. You can give us an update on that if you want. Plus, all the other things that are coming down the pike. And yesterday, Trayvon Diggs ended up being on that injury report. So can you kind of just give us an overall view of what's happening there, and then a update on Diggs, because that was a big one.
Yeah, they're kind of snake bitten right now, to say the least. I mean, obviously you lose Sam Williams in training camp, and that was on the heels of losing Dorrance Armstrong and Dante Fowler in free agency, and you're sitting there like, oh, man, what does this defensive end situation look like? But, hey, at least you got Micah and you got DeMarcus Lawrence, and good job spending the second-round pick on Marshawn Nealon, because it turns out you're going to need that sooner than later. And then now, this past week, or this week, I should say, you lose Micah Parsons, or you're going to lose Micah Parsons against the Steelers. He's week to week. We'll see what he feels like against the Lions. And then the Cowboys got the bye week. I think it's more likely for him for San Francisco 49ers than Detroit Lions, but we'll see. DeMarcus Lawrence, he's been moved to IR, so he's down for a minimum of 4 games. So Marshawn Nealon's going to get that many more reps. But then what does it look like outside of him? Mike McCarthy leaned heavily on a combo of Marshawn Nealon and Chauncey Golston, which was surprising to me, considering you have Carl Lawson being wrapped up, went from 8 snaps in his first elevation a couple games ago to 21, 23 snaps against the Giants. And I thought that his trajectory would be a little bit higher, but, we'll see. Maybe some gamesmanship, we'll see. Trayvon did, well, before we get to Trayvon, Brandin Cooks, like you said, is recovering from a knee infection, or an infection in his right knee, to put it more specifically. He was getting some shots in his knee, and it turned into an infection, unfortunately. So the Cowboys had to go in and basically clean that up, arthroscopic surgery. So he's going to be down for this week. 1 to 3 weeks is what I'm being told. Bye week is 2 weeks away. So if all goes well, he has a shot against the Lions, but it looks like a better shot against the 49ers, which is going to be a pivotal game, the pivotal game of the season. But Trayvon Diggs, he was walking around fine in the locker room. He was in normal good spirits. Didn't get a chance to talk to him yesterday, but talked to a couple people. They didn't seem concerned at all. I will put an asterisk next to that and say this. I'm not concerned based on the conversations I've had, but again, they've been snake bitten recently.
Right.
So keep your eyes on it, is what I'll tell you. Just keep your eyes on it. Let's see what today's injury report looks like. If he practices again, then I'm not so much concerned. If he's downgraded to like DNP, to not participate, then I'd be concerned. If he shows up as doubtful, on the game designation, I'd have some concern, most certainly. But as it stands, as we have this conversation, still not much concern about him. Flournoy and Zeke, they both left practice a little bit early with dehydration. For those that are not here in North Texas, it is unreasonably hot for the month of October, and Thursdays are the go-hard practice days for the Cowboys and Shells. That's their longest day of practice, and it's the most intense. So those two guys, Flournoy and Zeke, left with dehydration. I talked to Flournoy in the locker room. Zeke was in good spirits. He's fine. Talked to Flournoy in the locker room just to double-check and make sure he's good, and he's like, Pat, I'm perfectly fine. I cramped up a little bit. Talked to Britt. We got some hydration. He was like, I'm good. I'm good to go. Talked to CD about Flournoy, and CD said specifically, can't wait to see him out there on Sunday, end quote. So young bull ready to go.
I tell you something about Ryan Flournoy. I kind of joked about it yesterday. You wonder why he out there with dehydration? Because they said, "Oh, it's your turn," and he like, "All right, I'm running 100 miles an hour every single rep." Hey, Dak, you see me, Dak? Look. No, but seriously, bro, like he has to do that.
I don't
right?
think you're wrong. I don't think you're wrong, man. I think it's hey, look at me, and because think about it, right? And when it comes to Flournoy versus Tolbert versus Brooks, and even versus Turpin in this situation, and this discussion of who steps up in the absence of Cooks,
right?
As much as Mike McCarthy says, and I believe him, that the Cowboys have been for the past 4 weeks trying to figure out a way to get Flournoy on the game day roster, but the fact that he said it that way tells me that they're continuing to lean more heavily on the experience of Jalen Tolbert, Jalen Brooks, and to a lesser but still valuable degree, Kavate Turpin. They still haven't released Turp in the offense yet, and that kind of infuriates me, but story for another day.
Yeah.
But that's where my concern for Flournoy comes in, because I'm now more or less 99.9999% certain that Flo will make his NFL debut against the Steelers. What my concern is what's his target count going to look like? What's his rep count going to look like? Because, yeah, he's going to do some special teams work. Obviously, he's a rookie. He's got to get his hands dirty for Bones Fossil. But as far as targets from Dak are concerned, is this a game where, they have him out there, so that he's the extra body, but he's no more than the extra body? What I would like to see is you know what you have in Tolbert. More or less, you know what you have in Brooks. I would like to see more of Turpin. But you don't know, as far as NFL regular season meaningful snaps and games are concerned, you don't know what you have in Ryan Flournoy.
Right.
So this is a perfect opportunity over the next 1 to 2 weeks to figure that out. And then if you take advantage of that and give yourself a good sample size so that going into the bye week, you can say, okay, we know what we have in Tolbert, we know what we have in Brooks, and now because we've given, Flournoy, 4, 5, 6 targets a game over the past couple of games, now we can say, well, should he remain on the game day roster over a Brooks? Oh, it's not going to be over Tolbert, but maybe over a Brooks when Brandin Cooks comes back. So put yourself in position to, in a couple weeks from now, be able to have that educated conversation with yourself and your coaching staff about Flournoy, as opposed to 2 weeks from now, you're like, well, we only threw to the guy 2 times over the past 2 games. So, don't really know what we got there. Like, don't do that. Don't do that to yourself. Don't do that to the young man, because he's a freakish athlete. He brings you the kind of physicality and ball skills that you had with peak Michael Gallup, and dare I say that you had in the Dez Bryant era. He's the big guy. He can go up and attack the ball. He can be your downfield threat. He can do some underneath work. And you're going up against a Steelers defense that is lights out as far as stopping the run, but very much lights on when it comes to trying to stop the pass. So good opportunity for these young receivers against the Steelers defense, I should say.
I think you make a great point, and we really don't have anything to lose to get Ryan Flournoy the ball a little bit over the next week or two. When you look at Jalen Brooks, he only has 5 targets over the last 3 weeks. So, that's likely where he's stepping into, right? Because everyone's going to bump up. You're going to get Jalen Tolbert's now wide receiver 2. Brooks will be your traditional 3. Turpin will be kind of your quasi-gadget guy. I don't know what they're doing with Turpin. Pat, me and you on the same page here. This is strange.
Exactly.
And then Flournoy will take in wide receiver 4-ish, that Jalen Brooks role. So if you're only going to target him what's it been, about 1.5, 2 targets over the last 2 weeks. That's not going to show enough. What do you have to lose to get him the ball? Like you say, give him 4 targets, see what he can do with it, and then build on top of that.
Yep.
Because with all due respect to Jalen Brooks, you said it. I think we know what Jalen Brooks is. I think we know what his ceiling was coming out of college, in my opinion, where Ryan Flanoy, his ceiling is much higher. The athletic ability is there, the after catch ability to go up and get it. Like I think he's a more gifted athlete that you want to see the ball in his hands more than a Jalen Brooks. So you're spot on, in my opinion, there. I don't want to say spam him. That's a bit too much. But let's try to get him to rock 3-4 times. And then now you have actual data, right? You have actual data to say, okay, we can put him out there over Jalen Brooks for the rest of the year. Or it's not going to work out. Brooks has a rapport with Dak Prescott.
Yeah, and it's not about spamming the young man. It's about getting him involved so you can have enough data to do a meaningful evaluation. Because if you go in to the bye week and he only has 2 targets combined over between the Steelers and the Lions game, you don't have data to make a meaningful evaluation. All you can do is put him back on the inactives, but that's not his fault that he didn't produce on 2 targets unless both targets were 50-yard completions and 2 touchdowns.
Right.
But that's likely not going to be right. That's lovely, but that's not going to be the case. And this is not a knock to Jalen Brooks or Tolbert. It's just that you have enough data on them where you can kind of gauge where they are, where their ceiling is, where their athletic ability is. But when you're talking about pure athletes, I would argue outside of Micah Parsons that Ryan Flanoy is the most freakishly athletic player in the entire locker room. If you're strictly talking about the measurables and the athletics, outside of Micah, there's not another guy who's as physically gifted at his position in this locker room as Ryan Flanoy. Now, does that mean he's going to go out there and beat Jerry Rice? I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is if you give him enough targets and you give him the consistency over the course of several games, I think you will be more than pleasantly surprised with exactly how he can impact the game. And you will start calling him, a Michael Jr., like you used to call Michael Gallup, Dez Bryant Jr. I see that in him, but you got to give the guy an opportunity. And you're also going against the Steelers defense, and I talk about the secondary, the defensive front for them, and keep in mind Alex Highsmith hasn't practiced yet this week, by the way, folks.
I think he might be out.
So that's kind of a thing. But this is not the week to try to get the run game going. I don't believe that. They're number 2 in the league in stopping the run. But quiet as it's kept, they're 14th in the league in passing touchdowns allowed with 4. Guess who they're tied with at 14th? The Dallas Cowboys. So if you think that the Cowboys secondary is struggling, and they have been, then rightfully you have to look at the Steelers secondary and say, wow, they're struggling too, because they are. They're also 8th worst, the Steelers are, in the league in yards per reception allowed at 11.4. Guess who's 9th worst? Guess who's their next door neighbor in that category? The Dallas Cowboys with 11.5 yards allowed per reception. So if we're strictly talking the science, which we should be and we better be on the scientific method, for all of the rightful criticism that we have for the Cowboys secondary, and especially their run defense, but in the secondary allowing chunk plays and stuff like that, guess what? The Steelers are allowing it as well. So this is a game where if you're going to be without Brandin Cooks, you're still set up nicely because they have great personnel, but they run a lot of zone. They run a lot of single high. They run a lot of cover 3 and things like that.
Yeah.
Right, cover 3 and things like that. There are going to be spaces to make plays for these young receivers. So give the young receivers the ball, and I'm speaking specifically about Ryan Flanoy and Jalen Tolbert, and kind of let the rest flesh itself out.
Quickly on the other side of the ball, before I get your gut feeling, I don't recall a detailed injury report on Kalen Carson. I know he was out last week, had the shoulder situation, has been limited. Is it looking like he could be a go, or are we going to be looking at Amani and hopefully they keep Boots in the booth, but Boots again?
He's trending. Kalen is trending in the right direction. Practiced both days this week, both in a limited capacity, I should say. I spoke with him after both practices, and he says that he is feeling much better. I think that it's going to come down to how he practices today, and then they're going to make a final evaluation tomorrow. So money on the table, I'd say, as we have a conversation on Friday morning before they have this practice, 50-50 on Kalen Carson. You might see Amani back out there. But I say 51-49. 51-49, Kalen Carson takes the field. But again, this is before today's practice, and we'll see what happens there.
Prayer circle for Trayvon Diggs' ankle, because if no Carson and no Diggs, it's going to be very interesting.
Man. Man, because Justin Fields is doing some stuff.
Yeah. He can run around a little bit. We're going to talk about that, Cowboys, so make sure I put a pin in that. Gut feeling for this game, Pat. It doesn't have to be the outcome, but just something about this game that you're just feeling in your gut that you think will happen out there on the field Sunday night.
Oh, man. This is going to be trench warfare for the Cowboys against T.J. Watt and company. It will help them that Alex Smith may not be on the field. If he's not on the field, then you really only have to worry about Cameron Hayward and that interior line, and then T.J. Watt, but not necessarily both edges. T.J. Watt's not going to, jump edges. He's going to be placed in front of Terrence Steele. Steele has been a little bit shaky these past couple games. So you're probably going to have to give him some chip help, whether it be with Jake, whether it be with Rico, Zeke, whomever's in the backfield. Might even have to play some 12 personnel more than you normally would. And if you do that, I say give me John Stevens over Reverend Span 4, but we'll talk about that another time.
I heard you mention that yesterday. I like it.
Yeah, man. I'm saying it. I'm talking Cowboys, folks. You gotta watch Talking Cowboys. I think this is a game where the passing attack, CeeDee Lamb, Jake Ferguson, they get going. Put a question mark on who the additional receiver is that will get going. Hopefully it's Flanoy. That's what I'm hoping. The secondary in Pittsburgh will allow such things to take place. But I think that the absence of Micah and DeMarcus Lawrence looms extremely large against a mobile quarterback, and you were struggling against mobile quarterbacks when you had both of those guys on the field. I think it goes down to the wire. It's going to be gut punch after gut punch. I don't think it's going to be a high-scoring affair by any stretch of the imagination. Still working out my score, but I think the Cowboys escape with a win by 3 points on the boot of Brandon Aubrey in the final seconds of the game.
Butter.
That's just how these games go between the Steelers and the Cowboys. It always goes down to the wire.
I think
Butter gives you the win on a swing of the foot.
All right, Pat, man. Hey, listen, you got the Science Lab came out, I think, earlier this week, and now you're about to go head on over to Talking Cowboys. So make sure y'all check out my brother Patrick No C Walker, and of course, every week, and new wrestling podcast dropping on Wednesdays, man.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, y'all check out on DallasCowboys.com. Science Lab is up. It's been up for a couple of days ago. I dropped it a little bit early. It is the free agency option at defensive end because I don't know that KJ Henry is going to be the only solution here. Check that out so you can see what my options are, and I put the science and the scouting reports for each one of those guys for the Cowboys to go out there and hopefully do some work because they got money, so stop telling me you can't afford what I know you can afford. All right.
God, appreciate you, Pat. Patrick No C Walker, this week's version of the scientific method.